The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
Hey, this is Matt Landry, the voice of Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars The Clone Wars. You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars. This is where the fun begins.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, episode 139.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
Hey everyone, I'm Angela Sealana, and you're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away, including the deeper themes and meanings. Today we are diving into episode 12, the finale of the Andor series, season 1. Joining me today are Jason Eugea. Hi, Jason.
How's everybody doing?
Great, great. And also we've got Robert King with us. Hello.
How you doing?
Very well. This will be an exciting discussion, I think. And let's jump right into it. So we've got our finale, episode 12 of Andor, fittingly called Rick's Road. And the official summary is Cassian returns home to Ferrix, a tinderbox that is experiencing a spark of rebellion. So guys, I know there's a lot of ways to possibly answer this question, but what were your overall first impressions after watching this finale? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I thought it was very much like the whole series. It was kind of a slow burn at the beginning, but it really panned out at the end. When we get to the battle and all that, the escape and everything, it really made a lot of sense. But it was a slow start for the first probably 15 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe at least.
To me, it didn't really feel like a season finale. It felt like the end of another one of these, couple episode arcs. But it didn't seem to, it pulled together everything from the season, but it didn't feel like it tied them together, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I think you're right, Jason. That's kind of the feel that the whole series has had for me. So I am so ambivalent about this show and about this episode in particular, because there's so much to love about it, but there's also so many things that just don't sit right with me. So I kind of have this love-hate relationship with Andor going on.
Well, for me, I would say for my husband and I, we watched together, and after this episode, I'm a little different from some of the other episodes, but I think we were both just kind of processing everything that just happened, because as it ended, we were just sitting there in silence, just staring at the screen wow. Okay, so what does this all mean, and where is it going, and what happened to these characters, just kind of, again, processing everything that happened. So I guess we can do more of that together on the podcast. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was this character that has been in the background for so long, and finally in this episode we actually start with him, and that is Wilman Pack, the son of Salman Pack, who was the operator of the salvage yard, and he was hanged by the Empire. And we start, and he's assembling something, and I was very confident that this was a bomb. I don't know if you guys were too.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it was pretty obvious.
Yeah. And so he's assembling this bomb. You can tell in his face, he's looking at his dad's hollow. He's got this vengeful countenance, or just a really upset, frustrated, angry countenance. as he's doing this. And I thought it was for me a way to start with the theme of family and how this rebellion is really kind of, interestingly enough, has a whole lot of family ties. And I don't know why I didn't quite see that theme pop out at me throughout the series, but with this particular episode really hammered home for me that family was very integral to this story. So I'm curious kind of if you guys also picked up on that and what your reflection was just about Wilman or how we kind of started this episode, just to kind of kick it off.
I think as far as family goes, you see all the families come together in the final episode. You have Mon Mothma and her family, and really what appears to be the start of a new family in their relationships. And you see with those that get off the planet, Ferrix, maybe that's their new family, and the family of Ferrix as a whole and all of that. So it all sort of comes together at the end.
Yeah, I don't think family was the first thing that jumped out at me, but as soon as you mentioned it, I mean, certainly family is a huge thing for Andor himself, and he's clearly searching to find a place where he and his family can kind of call home. And this is kind of the story of him expanding his family and including others in his family. And then, as you said, other people are all looking for, how they can either connect to their family or build up a kind of found family. And some of them find it and some of them don't.
Yeah. And it's just really interesting thinking about how, integral that is to Star Wars just in general, and the stories that we've been familiar with for all these years, that family and found family as well, especially with, the Skywalkers. And then, of course, the way that the Skywalker story kind of ended with episode 9 as well, and found family being one of those themes. But, I thought that was really interesting, and I'll definitely continue to kind of tie that in as we're talking. But I know, Jason, you also had a theme that you kind of wanted to bring up. Maybe you could just introduce that now so that we can kind of reflect on that as we go forward here.
Well, one thing I noticed a lot was, especially throughout the whole series, and it all sort of came to a head in the finale, was the theme of what goes around comes around. Some people might call it karma or fate, those sort of things. So many characters in this show had that happen to them. One of the ones that started right away was Tim Carlo, that it was Bix's boyfriend. He sold Cassian out at the beginning when Cassian was being looked for, and I think he saw Cassian as a threat, in his relationship with Bix, being, I guess they were exes at some point. And so he sells Cassian out. Well, the people he called in ended up killing him. And so there's several examples of that. Zan Wan is the one that basically told Cassian about his mom passing, and
right.
he didn't keep that quiet at all, and he just kept telling people out in the open. And then Nurchi, in the very first episode, he cares about is money. He's wanting to get the money that Cassian owes him out of him. So at the end, he finds an opportunity to get that, and he sells Cassian out to the Empire. Well, how does he end up dying? Wilman's bomb ends up killing him, right? Well, and it happens to Cassian a couple times where he ends up getting arrested for not doing anything when he should have been arrested for murder, the Aldhani heist, all those things. He ends up getting arrested for nothing. Well, then he goes into prison and he ends up making, as it was said before, the cogs in the machine. And we see later what those are, and they end up killing him 5 years later. So over and over and over, we see that theme of what goes around comes around. And there's even a couple that are, I guess you would consider positive from certain, the Ben Kenobi from a certain point of view. You have Cyril Karn, who's so persistent in what he wants to get done. He's trying to get all these things done. He ends up meeting Dedra, and it seems like he, falls in love with her, and he ends up saving her. So, hope you would think we kind of are rooting for that relationship at this point. I think I don't know. I am maybe that he saved her and
in what way? I don't think I'm rooting for a romance there, but I am like really interested. It's a relationship that has so much tension and friction in it. I really want to see it, kind of see where it goes.
Yeah. But all of those stories, what goes around comes around.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I don't know if I would, I think I would kind of push back on that to say that I think some of the examples that you gave were more so sort of like the morality tale of what happens when you align yourself with injustice. Like that, I think ultimately a lot of these things are, if you put your faith in the empire's not going to put any faith in you necessarily, if they don't need you. So it's sort of like, also the Nurchi, I think you mentioned him just wanting money. I think ultimately it's like, well, money is not going to save you, but I think the people that kind of succeed the most in the story are not necessarily the most just people, at the same time. So it's a mixed bag, but I don't know. Well, maybe we'll tease that out as we go forward here. Rob, or did you? Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I think I might come a little bit in the middle between you two, because I do think one of the major themes of this show is that actions have consequences. And some of those consequences are foreseeable, and a lot of them are not. And there's sort of the unintended consequences, the fallout, as it were, from Andor's initial. He's walking away from the brothel in episode 1, and the security guys are following him, and he doesn't mean to kill the guy. He just means to get out of a bad situation, but he kills someone, and then he kills someone else, and then he has to be on the run, and that puts him in a situation where he's vulnerable to Luthen, and the whole thing kind of spins out of control from what seems like just like a little street altercation, right? So I do think that's a significant part of what the show is about. At the same time, yeah, I'm not sure I would call it like karma or fate, or, in Star Wars parlance, the will of the Force. In Christian parlance, we might call it justice. I think the show is raising a lot of questions more than it is like presenting a, here is karma, or here is fate, or something like that. I don't know.
I didn't think about the will of the Force. I like it.
Well, I mean, let's see where that goes. So before we really dive into all the really meaty stuff, let's look at another one of our side characters, Vel. And, I feel like I've been learning more about her with every time that we see her, just a little bit more, just a little taste. we see her briefly with Cinda, and we also see her with Luthen in this episode. And, you know, based on her background that we've learned over the course of the series, I'm really getting this sense that she may have wanted a change from her original rich family sort of societal life and joined this nascent rebellion. Maybe looking for a new family of sorts. But I think she's realizing that she can't have everything that she wants because of the nature of this work that she's doing for Luthen. You know, we see that she's very kind of like frustrated that she cares very much for Cinda. Cinda's very, you know, one-track mind. Let's get the mission done. You know, with Aldhani and the way that Aldhani happened, it seems like Vel is sort of like she's really upset that it didn't go the way that she was hoping for. She just seems really like angry and frustrated. And I don't know, do you guys get that same sort of feeling, or what are you feeling with this Vel character?
Yeah, she doesn't seem like she's enjoying her situation at all. Seems standoffish to almost everybody and only wants to, she's very self-centered when it comes to her relationship, very self-centered when it comes to even with her relationship with Mon Mothma and her niece, or are they cousins? I can't remember. But yeah, it's what am I going to get out of it? And rather than how can I help?
I think she's just starting to realize this about herself. Like my sense is that she has thought of herself as the gritty realist who is willing to do what, Mon Mothma isn't willing to do. But she's kind of waking up to the fact that no, at heart, she's kind of a romantic, and she's not getting the romance that she wants. She's not getting the happy ending, the adventure story kind of that she thought she was signing up for. Yeah, I think you're right about that. We're kind of seeing little glimpses of her, Angela, as we go along. So she's a fascinating character.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really curious what's going to happen with her character in season 2. Like, I almost wonder, she does seem to be committed to the cause of the rebellion, but at the same time, I just wonder if it's going to become too much for her at a certain point. It just sort of seems like she's getting to her boiling point.
What do you think she'll do when she breaks?
I really don't know. Because the thing is that she has so much inside information that it's almost like she can't leave the inner circle, right? She's sort of stuck where she is. So either she comes to terms with that, or she dies, or I mean, something's got to give, in other words. Yeah. So with Cinda, we did mention her briefly, going back to that theme of family. I was thinking about how we had learned that stormtroopers killed her whole family. And so, for her, that seems to be like such a deep motivator for her character. And she's a character we really haven't seen a lot of, and we haven't heard a lot from. But when we do see her, we know that she is just entirely in on this mission. And I'm really curious to see where she's going to go next season as well. If she will get up there in the ranks of the rebellion, or if she's going to go on this really dangerous mission going forward. We'll see.
If Bell tries to get out, Cinta's probably the one who will be assigned the task of tying up the loose end, as it were.
Oof.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's really creepy to think about, but yeah, that's true.
If I were a writer, that's how I'd do it, I think.
You heard it here first, folks.
Oh, man.
Okay, well, speaking of that whole family, let's go to Mon Mothma then. So she's, I mean, we really don't, we do get that scene of her, you know, introducing her daughter with her husband, introducing their daughter to Davos Sculdun's son. But we also see this really interesting scene of her sort of intentionally upsetting her husband and making him look like he has this really active gambling problem. I mean, it seems like the cause of the rebellion is actually tearing her family apart. So I'm really curious what you guys were thinking as we were seeing this unfold.
Well, she threw him under the bus. You know, yeah, you know, she was like, she knew that driver was listening. She knew he was a spy, and she purposely said all of those things to hide the fact that her money is missing because they know they've been watching it. She threw him under the bus on purpose to throw the Empire off the scent. And as far as you see the scene with the ISB later, it worked.
Yeah, and they're focusing on him as a way to get to her, which is exactly what he's accusing her, or he's thinking is an explanation behind why she's heard this probably false rumor that that she probably just made up on the spot about his gambling. It's weird because I have had zero sympathy for him as a character throughout the show to this point, and then suddenly it's like, oh man, for once he's in the right. It was kind of a weird emotional experience watching that, and you ask if the rebellion is ruining the family. I don't know if the rebellion is ruining it, because the family was already not in a great place to begin with, but it's definitely pushing it past the breaking point, I think.
Well, if you notice in previous episodes, whenever Lita would look at her mom, she was giving her the stink eye every time, you know? And so you knew that there wasn't a good relationship there.
Yeah. I mean, it's really been interesting because before this series, of course, we all thought of Mon Mothma as this really upstanding, virtuous character. And just slowly but surely, we've gotten to this point now where we're questioning that too. And last week on the podcast, we were talking about how, when you get into a war, there really is no pure goodness that actually exists within war, because it's just the nature of the beast. And so now we're sort of saying, well, if Mon Mothma really was so involved in this rebellion, in this Star War, that she's got to have, been active in some of this shady, behavior. And it's sad, but it's also sort of, again, with the whole, gleaning lessons from all of this. I mean, you can definitely learn from just how all of this sort of works,
Well, it's, kind of circling back, is facing the consequences of her actions and trying to manage what consequences she's willing to face and when. So she's putting the good of the rebellion, the good of maintaining her position in the Senate, the good of maintaining her position of influence, ahead of, the consequences for her daughter, of marrying the son of this gangster, the consequences of facing an imperial investigation into her finances, which could send her to jail at the least, and maybe uncover other people in the rebellion. She's prioritizing what consequences she's willing to face and when, and it's it's a muddy, messy situation. She keeps digging herself deeper in the hole, I think.
Yeah. And it's going to be really fascinating once we get into season 2 and we see, I think, we feel the wheels kind of turning ever quicker, as the urgency of the situation comes closer and closer. And I think once we get to season 2, we're really going to feel that. And I can imagine the family dynamic is not going to be any better in season 2. So, yeah. Well, unless you have any other thoughts, let's focus on Ferrix. Any other observations on Mon Mothma?
It's just that it was really interesting to me how disconnected Mon Mothma's story seemed. It was the only thread of the storyline. It was definitely set up earlier in the series, but it felt like it really had nothing to do with Cassian Andor. Everything else was somehow tied to him, and her problems kind of really seemed to be her own. And I thought, I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of that. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, my understanding is that she is in a lot of this financial trouble because they didn't make it out of Aldhani with all of the credits that they had hoped to. That was sort of my understanding of like maybe a couple of lines of dialogue a while back.
Do you think I didn't get the impression that any of the Aldhani money got to Mon Mothma? I thought Luthen was looking at her as a source of funding, not as somebody to be getting money to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's why she's in the trouble she's in, because she moved money to the rebellion and now she can't explain it, and the government's starting to ask questions.
Right.
I mean, I suppose that money could have been like the fund that funded the Aldhani operation in the first place, maybe? I don't know. It's all very vague and shadowy.
Yeah, it's money laundering.
If her money did go to it, Luthen didn't tell her that, because she was very surprised that happened, and he was like, "Who, me?"
Yeah, he does not want credit for Aldhani at all. And surprisingly so. I mean, this is maybe a complete rabbit trail, but like the way Luthen manipulates absolutely everybody that he has contact with is just, there's a man who does not want family in a way.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Well, and he says in this big speech that he gave up the opportunity for everything, So now what does everything mean? Is that family, or is that, was he a Jedi? Was he a Sith? He would have had to give all that up. I don't know.
So maybe the question is, does the rebellion ruin everybody's family? Or maybe does war ruin everybody's family?
Look at Leia and Luke. They both lost their adopted families.
Yeah.
Right off the bat from 1977,
Yeah, and I keep thinking of Star Wars Rebels, and how I think they're sort of like the family, quote unquote, that everyone points to, in at least those Star Wars fans that know the show. But they're all found family, and their own situations and lives were destroyed because of the war, just as you're saying. So yeah, great point. Okay, so now speaking of all that, when Cassian returns to Ferrix, the first thing that he does is he goes straight to his adopted dad's brick in the wall. And we get this lovely flashback of him listening to Clem teaching him this lesson about being resourceful. Did you guys happen to catch the connection between what Clem says and what Maarva will say in her hollow message at the end of the show?
Yeah, they're both talking about rust and being invaluable, and all you got to do is clean it up a little bit and makes it worthwhile.
That sense of we've got each other, we've got something good here, and it's worth hanging on to, holding together.
Yeah, it was really neat. To me, it reminded me that, there are certain lessons that your parental figures teach you going through life that are sort of established as like inherent to your family's identity. Like my maiden name is Santana, and my dad used to say growing up, Santanas are so and so or such and such, and we do this, but we don't do this, and so I've heard that that's very common to sort of use that formula in like Spanish speaking households, but bottom line is that family passes on these lessons to us that sort of build our sense of our own identity. And I thought this was really cool to sort of see Cassian's, youth, this lesson from his youth kind of finally come back up for him, this memory. Because, you have those memories that just sort of pop up at these times, right? When you're starting to learn certain things and puzzle pieces are starting to come together for you. And it seems like for Cassian, maybe this is one of those moments. So I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to that.
Well, it was a perfect example of how to use a flashback. They flashed back to something that Clem was teaching him, and it applied to the moment that they were in right then. So, from a movie making standpoint, it made sense.
Yeah,
it's kind of an insight into, because one of my frustrations with the show is how to understand what Cassian Andor is thinking, actually going through his head. Man, you really have to do a lot of work to read between the lines. And I think this is one of the times where they, this memory, this flashback is finally kind of showing us what's going on in his mind. And he's kind of wondering if he's worth saving, if he's worth cleaning off the rust, if there's anything under the rust to clean up. And that, like, that combined with the final scene of the show, which we'll get to later, but that kind of really put all of his actions in the earlier episodes into a new light for me.
Yeah. So I guess when we get there, we'll talk about that. But I really thought it was a lovely little moment. Just a tender reminder of his dad. So, okay. So we get, the next thing that he does is he meets up with Brasso, who's like a big brother, I think, really figure, for him in a way. And Brasso gives him Maarva's final words. And this was really moving. And I know that one of the things that Don Bettinelli, our CEO of SQPN, one of the things he mentioned that he loved was that he felt like a lot of what Maarva said is what God would tell each one of us. So I'm curious what you guys pulled from Maarva's last words.
I would say the same thing, that, Jesus loves us more than anything we could do wrong. That's the perfect way to put that. I mean, that is mercy at its utmost. And that's what Jesus wants for us. We just have to accept it.
Yeah, I loved the final line there, I love him more than anything he could ever do wrong. And that's just so beautiful and perfect and motherly and mothering in the best sense, truly being a mother to him. What, again, this kind of love-hate thing, it followed on this very political kind of message, it was already burning. He's just the first spark of the fire, which feels like she's talking about the rebellion there. And it feels kind of disconnected to the rest of what their relationship has been through the show. Their relationship hasn't been, centered around the rebellion or the cause or anything. And then suddenly it's like, why is this political speech kind of filtering into this final message? So it's like, oh, this is the best final message and also kind of the worst at the same time in my mind. It just was confusing to me.
I think they did put a little bit of that earlier in the show with when Clem is killed, because they still got clone troopers marching through Ferrix, and he tries to stop. Some other people are trying to start an insurrection. Clem's like, no, everything's fine. Calm down. Well, he's the one that gets arrested and hung. And now she said how many times she had to go through there and see him hanging. Well, it stopped her from ever going there. And so that's been festering in her, that the clone troopers killed him. And now they've got the stormtroopers replacing them. She's just over it, And now when they came back in and took over Ferrix again, I think that was the final straw.
Yeah. I would say kind of watching some of my loved ones that have, finished their journey on Earth. A lot of times I think what happens is when they know that they're getting to that point, they sort of have this, message that they want you to know, or they want you to remember. And there's something that just becomes it's like a seed that was planted in them a long time ago, sort of comes up to the surface in a way. And that's sort of how I interpreted what was happening with Maarva as well, kind of on the lines that you're saying, Jason. That part of at the very beginning of Maarva's last words, she says, "Tell him none of this is his fault. It was already burning." And so it's almost like maybe she realizes that potentially what Cassian was doing in true mother fashion, sort of knowing what your kids are doing without them actually telling you, that what he was doing had something to do with what was going on in the galaxy, with the Empire, and that may have been the reason that he was gone when she left, the Earth or Ferrix, and sort of like, well, it's not your fault. It was already burning. Like, this was already coming, and she to me, it's like Ferrix has all of these beautiful sort of industrial metaphors, right? Like, you've got the anvil with the, calling everyone to street, and we've got this speaking of rust and speaking of, brick and the spark of the fire. It's like all very industrial, and so it all sort of comes into, I think, almost like what is their cultural folklore in a sense, that these people, when they speak about things that really matter, they speak about it in these terms like stone and fire and metal, and and so for her to say, he's just the first spark of the fire, it's like it's almost like more than just the fire that she sort of is talking about with the rebellion. It's almost like something deeper, something more like a loving message. Do you kind of get what I'm saying or trying to say?
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and I can kind of see that. I guess so. Part of this is I'm coming to this show from the idea of like when Rogue One came out, right? They announced that they were going to do something with Andor almost immediately. And I was always kind of wondering why him? Why Cassian Andor? And I've kind of been waiting for this show to answer that question. You know, why is he such a critical character? And it just feels like they're just kind of like shoehorning in. But remember, he's the one who stole the Death Star plans. He's the one who's this great hero of the rebellion. But he's not yet, and I don't feel like the show is really supporting that. It feels like they're shoehorning it in rather than actually building it organically to the character. But all that said, I'm perfectly willing to admit this could be because I'm coming at it from this like I've got a question and you're not answering the question that I'm asking. And
Sure.
maybe I'm missing the answer that you're giving to a question that, you know, to a different question. So like, I don't know. I want to like present, here's my experience of the show, which is not entirely positive, but at the same time, I want to respect like all of my friends absolutely love this show and love every part of it. And yeah, would, yeah, like go to that kind of interpretation that would maybe be more of a I don't know, maybe more of a hermeneutic of continuity than the kind of hermeneutic of disruption that I might be looking for.
Well, and I wonder, based off what you're saying there, it'd be interesting to hear from somebody that's never watched Star Wars ever and sat down and watched episode 1, 2, 3, The Clone Wars, and watched all of that chronologically and see all this play out, if they would have the same opinion. You know, we know how this ends. We know where it ends up. So we're all sitting here going, why is he the key? Why, you know, we had a big discussion about that on Discord, I think, where why is he I'm the one that put that on there. Why is Andor the center of everything? And so everybody had their kind of opinion that I think Angela had said that it was, he's like the representative victim, you know, that he's sort of getting dumped on from every situation, whereas most people just get a little bit here and a little bit there. He's getting all of it. But yeah, that's kind of where I was at, was why is he the center of it? But we're looking at it from knowing the whole saga. So it'd be interesting to see what somebody knew, but you know, most of us nerds aren't going to be that guy.
Yeah. And I mean, thank you for, I mean, this is a place for honest discussion. So it's totally welcome.
Thank you for making a safe place for me.
You got to be able to nerd out and just, you know, speak your mind, man. So speaking of speaking your mind, let's talk about Nemec's manifesto, shall we?
Oh, yeah.
That was really cool. I loved how they created this sequence with, you know, you'd hear a certain section and you'd see someone who sort of like illustrates what's going on or what's being narrated. And just how the main thing that sort of came up for me was this idea of freedom is natural, oppression is unnatural. What did you guys really pull from that as like the nuggets or the jewels?
Well, one thing that really struck out to me was the Empire, you know, at the end of episode 3, the movie, you know, Palpatine says, we're going to make everything safe. There's be no more war. Everything's going to be fine because we're all going to be united into one happy empire. Everything will be great. And then somebody on Discord made me think about this when they said that you know, these captains and stuff, the leadership of the military haven't been tested in 15 years. So you've got a whole new generation that haven't had to do anything like this. I mean, they're all just completely shocked and they don't know where to go. But then I wonder, why does the Empire, if the Empire thinks they're doing what's right, you know, of course, we all know they're, you know, controlled by the dark side, right? But most people don't understand that. Mm-hmm. And they think they're doing what's right. Why is there so much military? Why is there so much tyranny and fear if what they're doing is good? That's where I got it. Where do all these weapons come from?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Who are they fighting?
Right.
Well, they're fighting their own people. They're yeah.
They were planning for a rebellion. They were expecting the rebellions.
They were afraid of it, I think, is kind of how Nemec would put it.
Right. If what you're doing is good, you shouldn't be worried about any of that.
Robert, what did you think of this manifesto?
I'm just kind of processing
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Because they are. You know, this is a military that's very inward focused. They're not fighting anybody outside themselves. Right. You know, the whole Legends canon aside. And I think that's a really strong and interesting insight that comes out of Nemec's manifesto. I think it's interesting that, you know, he says tyranny requires constant effort, but freedom requires constant effort too.
True.
And that was something that I wanted to kind of draw out. You know, life requires constant effort, I guess, and it's like, you know, how are you going to spend that effort? But you know, I'm not gonna get the exact wording, but I'm remembering, you know, all the patriotic 4th of July kinds of you know, stories and media and shows that I watched in school and as a kid, and how it was, you know, you need to constantly protect freedom. You need to constantly protect liberty and democracy and constantly be working toward that. And you know, we kind of see that even today with the kinds of arguments we're having in the real world. And so, yeah, tyranny requires effort. Freedom requires that. I think it's conviction requires effort. You know, conviction. If you are really convinced about something, like at Mass this morning, the homily that I heard was about how here we are at the beginning of a new liturgical year, and we're hearing the call of Christ again. And this is a call that will radically change our lives. And that it requires us to see the whole world in a new way and to make a commitment that will kind of consume all of our lives. And it's going to require daily effort to continue to follow Christ in that way. And I think that's one of the things that I really love about this show is it shows people who are absolutely committed to what they believe, you know, whether it's Nemec or Luthen or Mira or Cyril, and in this episode, absolutely Maarva, right? And so maybe what we're seeing is like the conversion of Cassian Andor. It's like, how does he come to the conviction that he ultimately will have?
That's a good point. I hadn't seen it that way.
Yeah, I definitely saw this episode in particular that way, but I think just the whole series, because that was really one of the questions that faced the writers of the show was, how does Cassian get from where he started off, you know, as a kid, to who was probably afraid and didn't know how to respond to his particular situation, to now, or are now being, you know, post Rogue One, right? So
Mm-hmm.
So this conversion of Cassian Andor is definitely how I would put it. To your point about, freedom, it requires, and conviction requires effort. I guess the Catholic sort of way to sum that up is that to live free, we have to put forth effort because we live in a world where temptation against freedom is a real thing, right? Like, and that's definitely something that, is not going to be found in Nemec's manifesto, because it's sort of like, he said that freedom is natural. And I would say freedom is like supernatural from a Catholic perspective. Like freedom is something that we gain through unity with God and living, with God's grace and God's life, which is grace. And so, in that sense, freedom is not natural. Like it doesn't just happen. Like you're saying, you have to make the choice, right, to be united with God in that way. So, but
fallen world, yeah.
Yes, in our fallen world, right? So, so that sort of like, I was like, oh, when he said natural, I was like, oh, not so much. But I get the point, which the point is that he's trying to say that these people are trying to oppress you, and it's constantly, they're having to work at it. So don't feel like you're the only one that's working, and they're just out there with their fist on you, and it doesn't take anything for them to do that. No, it's because they're afraid of you is basically what he's trying to say. So
back to the prison, there are not enough of them, and they know it, and that makes them afraid. Yeah.
There's one thing I picked up on in his speech too, was he was talking about how there's little rebellions all over the galaxy. There's little skirmishes, little battles happening all over the galaxy. But in this, what we see in this show and throughout the other canon stuff, we see the Aldhani heist, sort of the first big thing, but it was a surprise attack. The Empire wasn't expecting that at all. Well, here on Ferrix, they set a trap. Where they were trying to set a trap, right? They knew that this battle was coming in some form. That's why they had all the guys in riot gear and all the stormtroopers stationed everywhere. They knew this was going to happen. So one thing I noticed was, after the captain flipped over B2 Emo and Brasso was the first one to kick somebody, then it's just started sort of martial arts, fist fights and stuff. But the first real weapon somebody gets hit with something was Maarva's brick. Brasso uses his brick as the first real weapon in that battle. So I thought that was pretty impactful, that she's the first weapon.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably how she wanted to go out, right? She wanted to go out fighting, and her body sort of limited her. But that was really fascinating how, and I guess let's go ahead and jump into it, the funeral procession. How, we were just talking about this industrial sort of culture, that this was the way that they remembered their dead, and that they sort of felt like they could live on and help the community, was to sort of literally be built into the city, right? Into the life of the city. And I think they called it a funerary stone. And I just thought it was interesting reading this article on StarWars.com with Tony Gilroy talking about how they worked on the show. And one of the things that he said was that the funeral procession was one of the first things that they actually did some work on, that he worked with the composer named Nicholas Bertel, and that they worked on creating this piece of music, which, by the way, all the musicians were actual musicians playing on screen. And he wanted this procession, this ancient ritual, to feel like the people of Ferrix. He wanted this to be rooted in a culture, a society, and that was how they started working on this show, was through this piece of music. So I thought that was really sort of true to real life, that, you know, our culture sort of informs so much about how we relate to everything. And I almost wish that I could watch this episode and then go back and watch. I mean, I can go back and watch the whole rest of the series, because I feel like I might be able to understand Cassian a little bit better and just all the people on Ferrix a little bit better after watching all this. So yeah, I'd love to get your take on the funeral procession, Maarva's speech, just any of it. Just go for it, because I know we're going to talk for a while.
I mean, that music was so beautiful. And just like the simplicity of it, and the repetitiveness of it, just like sunk into your heart and you know, grabbed on and would not let go. I thought it was marvelously done. And I mean, we talked about the editing, the montaging during Nemec's sort of reading of his manifesto, and the montaging as, you know, the preparations for the march are beginning, and the march is going on, and the reactions to the march. I mean, it's just, as a piece of editing and filmmaking and storytelling, it's one of the most moving things I've seen in a long time. It's marvelous.
Well, and I think it was foreshadowed throughout the whole series. You guys talked on the podcast last week about how the opening credit score is different every week, and it's what I saw was they're pulling in new instruments every time. And if you watch that funeral procession now, it starts with just a few people and a few instruments. Like, it starts with one drum, right? And then you get a couple horns. And then as they start walking, you get people from coming out of this building and that building and off of this street and off that street, until you just got this whole symphony and this whole street full of people. They foreshadowed that in the opening credit score for 12 episodes. And it's that is the music that we've been hearing. We just didn't know it. We didn't know what it was from. So I think that they've been foreshadowing that funeral the whole time. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, that's really cool. I thought Maarva, you know, sort of being the mother of all these people, you know, she was called the daughter of Ferrix, and sort of being a mother to all these people seemed very fitting, because especially as we saw Cassian, he was doing what he needed to do to get Bix out of there, you know, out of the hotel. And it was almost like, okay, mom's doing her thing, I'm going to do my thing. Right. Like that's kind of the sense that I got was, you know, he was hearing what was going on, and he knew something. Maybe he knew the whole plan, but he was also like, okay, I've got to get Bix, because she's family to me. You know, she's been there for me through all of this, and I cannot let her down. I can't just leave her with these people, because he knew what they're capable of. And so it was almost like this whole family experience there, like the whole community just gathering around this woman and hearing her sort of give her last words to them that they've been sleeping, right? I think that was I was listening to the Advent, you know, the new readings and everything. Right, and I was like, Waco sleeper, you know, and it's like, oh yeah, you know, Advent, Maarva, she was right on target. But that's kind of what I thought of too.
I loved also the when the instruments got started up, everybody that we were focusing on turned around and said, what's that? What's happening? What's going on? Even though this was Vel and Luthen, and then Mira and the other Imperial officers. both of those groups had been like preparing for this for a long time, and it still caught them completely off guard. They didn't understand what was happening, and I don't know. I think that this is part of what Nemec is saying. I think maybe when he says that freedom is natural, I think he's also saying that like rebellion is a force of nature. It's not something we can control. It's not something that we can completely understand. It kind of happens. It grows up in a way that we can only like discover and wonder at. I'm not sure I agree with that because, you know, warfare is ruining families throughout this story. But
maybe rebellion
I
against oppression.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it's well, and I don't know. It's interesting that like throughout this story, you've got the Imperials who are painted as more evil than I think we've ever seen them in any other Star Wars property, but we've also got the rebellion that's kind of painted as more morally gray than we've ever seen it. And then you've got the people of Ferrix who are just people, right? Mm-hmm. They're just living their lives trying to be human, or I don't know, sentient beings, I guess, in the Star Wars universe. But they're just trying to be people, and they're kind of caught between these the pincers of this Star War, and this funeral was, yeah, just the people together was really beautiful.
And I don't think that those people in particular, most of them just didn't want the Empire there. They weren't necessarily looking out for an entire galaxy. They were just looking out for Ferrix.
Right.
You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, we see how hard Mon Mothma and Luthen have to work to get people to sort of join their cause.
Right.
And yeah.
It's sort of like what Maarva says in her speech is that, you know, well, that's what we've been doing. You know, we let them come in. We opened our trade routes. You know, we took their money. We just ignored them. You know, it's sort of like you're saying, we're just trying to live. We're just trying to get by. But I think by her saying we were sleeping, she was really saying, you know, we had our eyes closed to what this was really about. That it wasn't about just let them come in, let them do whatever they need to do. You know, they'll just be on the side. You know, it was about, I guess what you could say, living in freedom in a way, because this, if you want to talk about unnatural, you could talk about the Empire in a lot of ways. But they really they came in and it was almost like this disease or something, right? That just kind of latches on and spreads, and it doesn't want to let go, you know, just on its own. You have to fight it. And so the reality of, oh yeah, she says that. I'm looking at her words, like she says the Empire is a disease. Yes. Yeah.
There's a wound that won't heal.
Yeah.
Well, it is. Great. I mean, the whole natural unnatural language. You know, this harkens back to the prequel trilogy of, you know, you know, the dark side, you know, is a path to powers that some would call unnatural, and I think that, I mean, yeah, the language of nature and natural is really powerful language, and I think I don't know, this is again something that this show does incredibly well, is it shows the complexity of, like, you've got political idealism and you've got real lived experience, and they don't meet neatly, right? And you've got the sort of careerist idealism of a Deborah Mira, and you've got the kind of, I don't know, philosophical idealism of Nemec, and you've got the very practical idealism, I guess, of Luthen, and none of them seem quite completely natural. But that, Maarva's speech, this is a disease, and it's easy for the dead to tell you to fight, and maybe it's true, maybe fighting is useless. Perhaps it's too late, but this has become something where we have no other choice. It's, we fight or we die. And that's like the whole thrust of her speech. And that is maybe kind of the natural root of what is good in the rebellion, maybe? I don't know. I'm kind of...
Yeah.
I'm processing this as I talk here. So.
It makes me think that maybe she's saying to everybody that, because she says how many times she's been at those funerals. She's been there where they're at, right? And she's saying, if you don't fight this, we won't get to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You won't be here. You won't be the brick, right?
Right.
So she's saying, you said fight or die. She's telling them that.
Right.
Well, we saw
the
this
culture
on
will die
Aldhani.
for sure.
Yeah,
we saw
that's
this
true.
on Aldhani, how the Empire had the plans to. Oh yeah, we've been working to basically not just build up our own power, but to destroy their culture.
Right.
Right. Yeah,
and they mock it by giving them, the one little fur. They're basically mocking them, saying, "All right, we're good for 3 years now, right? Leave us alone." So yeah, she's saying fight or our culture gets destroyed.
I think it's beautiful in that context then to know how integral the piece of music was, because you even, one of the scenes I'm thinking of is Bix in the prison, so to speak, her prison cell, and she's hearing the music and she's humming along to it, even like in that terrible mental state that she's in, and we know her mind's been so twisted and who knows what else, that tortured, but still, it's so instinctual, this ritual that's part of the life of these people, that, living and dying, I mean, what's more natural than that, right? Just like going through that cycle of life. And these people just know this song, and they know what to do when the anvil is hit, and they know what to do when everyone comes together on this particular street. And it's so comforting and it's so natural for them. And so to realize that that's interrupted when the officer comes over and throws his coat over, the hollow, and tries to, and then finally kicks over B. That's like the wake up call. That is everyone realizing what she's saying is absolutely true, that our way of life, what's natural for us, our day to day, everything that's so ingrained in who we are is threatened by this presence. And, we've seen that in so many different ways in Star Wars, but to see it in this particular context with all these characters, this huge cast of characters just that we've gotten to know on Ferrix, even with Silman Pack, having been, hanged on this street, and Clem having been hanged on this street by the Empire. It's like, we've gotten to see and feel that history. So it was really that much more impactful than finally, I think, what the finale does is it takes advantage of all that, that we've learned over all these episodes, so that we really get that impact of feeling what those people feel in a way. Well, the other thing that we see a few things happen. one of the things that happened is that Dedra Miro almost gets pulled apart by the crowd in the chaos.
Yeah.
Which was really amazing visually to behold. I mean, and Cyril swoops in and saves her. And I'm wondering, she's told during this episode, if she wants to, quote unquote, start a conversation, she needs to find Axis. Well, now that she knows how truly desperate, and she feels it now, she's gotten really shaken up by what's going on. In the second season, will she give Cyril a second chance? Maybe he'll be an undercover agent for her. Maybe he will, I don't know if he'll be hired by the Empire somehow formally, but I'm just wondering where this is all going to go. Do you guys have any theories about what Dedra was thinking and feeling and what might happen with Cyril going forward?
I think you feel it watching it. To me, in the last 2 times I was on the podcast, I kept saying he's going to be flipped. He's going to go to the rebellion. And now I'm like, nope, that ain't happening. Because he seems completely redeemed. When his buddy, they're on that transport and his buddy switches hats, it's the captain's hat, right? Or the leadership hat, right? His buddy gives him that hat back. And he's just got a grin on his face the entire time. When he saves, he's like, I get to save her, and she's like, I get, she's like completely shaking. She, you just got that adrenaline pumping through her. And she's like, I guess I need to thank you. And he's like, nah, we're good. He's just got that smirk, that grin. He seems completely redeemed. So I think that they're going to become partners in some sense. To some extent, we'll see how far that goes. I don't know. But I was wrong on my last prediction, so we'll see.
Well, I think she's absolutely going to take him seriously now. In a way, she's been utterly dismissive of him before, and she's like, okay, yeah, I'm definitely going to take him seriously. But I don't know how much pull she's going to have, because from an Imperial point of view, this is a failed operation. They failed to keep the peace. They failed to capture Andor or Axis. It looks like a loss all around, and her superiors seem to value results. And so I don't know how much more slack they're going to give her. So I am kind of curious to see how her position is going to develop.
Right. Maybe the two of them are going to end up being sort of, well, the Empire kicked us out on the street, in a sense, and we know what's the right thing to do, and we've got to go after these people. So we're going to do it together. Maybe something like that.
Yeah, because Cyril's already been there.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past the both of them flipping to the rebellion at the end. Depending on how hard the Empire kicks them to the curb. It's stranger things have happened.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, before we get to Luthen, who's very interesting, I think, in this episode, even though he really has minimal lines on the script. Let's talk about how we have this old ship on a full tank of gas, which I thought was interesting that they emphasized that it was a full tank. So I wondered if that was metaphorical, but kind of saying the rebellion has what it needs. Let's go. But they escape. These people escape, and so it's Big Brother Brasso. We've got Bix, and we've got Jez, the sort of other mother figure from the Daughters of Ferrix, and we have Wilman, and the reliable old dog B2 Emo, and they're flying to Ganji Moon, which I did not look up, so I'm not sure if it's a place we're already familiar with in Star Wars.
I'm not sure.
So what ideas do you have about why these particular people are on the ship out?
Sure looks a whole lot like the Ghost Crew, doesn't it?
Kind of does. You've got the mom and Jez. You've got, like I said, Brasso, the brother. Maybe Bix is like the little sister. Willman's kind of like the son, like the prepubescent son. And then you've got the droid, the lovable droid, right? So it's almost like Cassian's new family.
Kind of in the Kanan role there, maybe?
Sort of, maybe, possibly.
But no, it very much felt like this is Cassian's family. These are especially Bix, very especially Bix. And like the one goal he's had from the beginning of the series is, I want to get my family out. I got to get out of here.
Get him safe.
I want to take my family with me and get him someplace safe. And it feels like, okay, he's done that. And then he doesn't go with them. And that's a really interesting choice.
Well, is that because he knows that Luthen has a mark on his head? He knows that if he just goes, he's going to keep running. So I know we're going to talk about that in a minute, but he knows he's got a mark on his head, and he doesn't want to put them in danger of that. Whereas he did before, everybody came to Ferrix looking for Andor, and he split, and everybody was still. That's when the Empire came in, and he's like, I can't do that to them again. So he sends them off to safety, and he goes and faces it.
Yeah. Because he is finally realizing, okay, my actions have had much bigger consequences than I expected, and I can't just run away from them.
Right. Very good point. Very good point. And that was one of my questions was, okay, Cassian said he was going to find his family, his new family. He was going to find them, and he was going to be with them at some point. That's what he promises them as he's leaving. But then he goes straight to Luthen, and he's like, well, you can kill me. It's like, doesn't that totally negate what you just told those people on the ship? But I think you basically have put your finger on his motivation there, which is, I think he's facing the consequences, right, of what he's done, and really he escaped death so many times. If you think about
so many times
this series, that he goes and he looks death in the face potentially with Luthen. And I personally think he was, obviously he's used to taking risks. But I think by this point, he perhaps has his mother's words and his father's lessons and everything, all this encouragement and motivation. He's got Nemec's manifesto in his mind now. And he's looking at Luthen and he's like, dude, you couldn't catch me. You tried to catch me before. So now that you know how good I am, take me in or kill me. And he's almost like, I know that he's not going to kill me. Right. That's kind of how I'm interpreting it.
No, I'm seeing it in light of that earlier flashback with his father and the rusty parts that everyone wants you to throw away, but we can clean them up, and Andor has one of the consistent things throughout the series has been he has this kind of sorrow for, I'm sorry for the things I've done. I'm sorry for how I've hurt people. I know it's been bad. And he's been trying to get away and get past that. He's been trying to make up for his debts, pay off his debts, things like that. And now I think this is kind of him asking, you know, am I worth cleaning up, or should I just be thrown away? And it feels like, at least from Diego Luna's face in that last scene, I really felt like it was a genuine question. You know, kill me or take me in. I'm kind of completely done, and I've got nothing left. And the first time I watched it, it was actually confusing. It caught me completely off guard. And so this is, you know, I've been working at it. It's like, how do I understand this? And I think this is where I've come to, is I think he might be just like horribly contrite, and to the point of depression and maybe even suicidal tendencies. And I mean, I don't want to make light of, you know, I've struggled with chronic depression myself, and I know many people out there do, and with suicidal ideations, but you know, I kind of see this as, you know, maybe this is you know, this is where he's come to in his journey.
Do you think Luthen realizes that and sees him and sort of, I think he comes to Ferrix for one thing, which is to kill him. And then I think after seeing everything transpire, he leaves surprised in a way. Not entirely surprised, but I think he's surprised in a way, and things don't go as planned, and not that he's not used to that, but at the same time, he kind of is this person that strategizes 24/7. And I just wonder what's going through his mind, Luthen's mind, at the end of this episode after having seen everything that happened on Ferrix. What do you think?
Well, I think his smile says a lot. He's like, okay, now he's ready. That's what I saw from that now he's ready to go fight. He's not going to turn me in. I think Luthen at first, he's looking out for number one, right? But then he's like, okay, this guy's ready. He's on our side. Cause Luthen heard the speech. Luthen knows that's his mom, you know? So Luthen kind of knows where Cassian's head's at now. And he's like, okay, now he's ready.
Yeah, he came looking for something special. You know, he didn't care about the incredibly rare and important piece of Imperial tech that Cassian was trying to sell in the first 3 episodes.
That's all it was about before, was give me my 40,000 credits so I can move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now he sees someone who is, you know, what was the scene that kept coming up in almost every previously on, you know, for the first, you know, 2/3 of it, you know, don't you want to give it all for something that really matters? And here's someone who is finally able to do that. And
willing. I think he's willing to.
Yeah. Yeah. And Luthen, because I think Luthen is absolutely a villain here. Luthen is like, good, a tool I can use. You know?
I don't know. Luthen is such an interesting character that has so many layers, and it's been a delight and scary in some ways, but also a delight to just discover more about this character. I would love to hear all of our listeners' takes on Luthen and all these other awesome characters that we've met. That, you know, whether you like the show or not, I think everyone can at least agree that there's a lot of really thoughtful writing. You know, whether or not you agree with the directions that the stories and the characters went, you can tell that these characters were crafted, and there was a lot of attention that went into this show. And it's been really fun to kind of dive into those layers, and I'm sure we'll continue to reflect and discuss that on the show as we discover more Star Wars stories. Do you guys have any closing thoughts? I know it feels like we just scratched the surface, but do you have anything else that you really wanted to share today?
I do. One thing I noticed when Luthen is going back to his ship, he's on that speeder bike, and it looked very, very, very similar to Anakin going to fight the Sand People, and Darth Maul going to find Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and Count Dooku heading back toward his ship to escape the Geonosis fight. So it looked very similar to all of those. Now, do I think that he's fully dark side Sith? I don't think so, because in his speech he says, I'm having to use the tools of my enemy. So if he is Jedi, then he's having to use the dark side, but he doesn't want to. But he's doing it because he knows that that's how to defeat the, Vader, Palpatine. Whether he knows that they're in control or not, I'm not sure, but it seems very similar to me. It seems like I think we're pointing in that direction.
Okay. Very, very, I would say that's a daring assertion. That is really,
we'll see next year.
Yeah, we'll see. I wonder if our listeners are taking tallies on like all of our theories. Okay, Jason's theories. 1-1,
I'm 0 for 1 so far.
Well, I am fully in the Luthen is a fallen Jedi camp as well. Yeah, no, I don't know if I have any real final thoughts. I just want to say, man, I love this show in so many ways, and at the same time, there are so many things that I wish the show did in, I don't know, maybe what I'm looking for is a more accessible way, or a more, or maybe it is I'm just asking a different question than Tony Gilroy and the other writers are doing. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to season 2, and I'm not pleased that it's going to be so long until it drops.
Well, let's hear from everybody listening out there. Please email us your thoughts about Andor, and you can do so at starwars@sqpn.com. You can also find us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. You can leave a comment there on one of our posts about the show. You can also tweet us at SQPN. And please do just share the podcast on social media so that our family here, our found family, can continue to grow. Some of those really cool family members that make this podcast possible are our patrons. And so we want to thank some of them, in particular, Carl W., Brian W., Michael M., Christopher K., and Ira R. And if you'd like to join our StarQuest family, you certainly can. One of those ways is by giving and becoming a patron. You can do so at sqpn.com/give. You can also just tell people about the show. You can rate us, review us, help people to know that Secrets of Star Wars is out there. And we thank you so much for doing that. Next week, we will be back to take a deeper look at Tales of the Jedi, that awesome new animated series. That'll be very exciting. So until next time we see you, Robert King, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
Oh, thanks for having me.
And Jason Eugea, pleasure to have you on the show as well.
Thanks, I enjoyed it.
And once again, I'm Angela Sealana. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Wars on Star Quest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy. Let's Science. Find the show wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/science.